on the panel. He was the Sikh representative on the panel. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I don't remember seeing you. Oh,
yeah, I was
I'm
sitting
sorry.
in the audience.
Isn't that
so,
funny?
and I did not see you, but I heard your voice mentioned or your name mentioned.
Oh,
She was a prime organizer, and she just got an award for the.
I live in the Niagara Falls area, and our Gurdwara is on 19th Street in Niagara Falls. And so
yeah, we're having a vaccine clinic on 19th on Friday.
Wow.
And now, what grade do you teach again?
I teach third grade in Wheatfield.
Right,
so,
third.
Yep. But so I've tried to be pretty active in Niagara Falls. I was part of, I don't know, they had like the prayer, interfaith prayers against the violence in Niagara Falls. So I kind of help with that. And then they had the mental health prayer service as well that Mark Breeze runs every year. So I'm more involved in this neck of the woods. So
Right.
Okay, good.
Well, there
good.
you
We'll
go.
have to connect soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to have you meeting each other. It's about.
Right.
Yeah, that's part of the good thing about this. Honestly, we've been seeing this show is, first of all, really good for handling controversial topics with people who don't agree with each other, which we've done some of that, not huge amounts, or also people meeting each other who haven't met each other, or just, so it's just, it's already good. It's already good to have everybody here. And I'm so glad to have you two meeting each other where you're so active up there. So now you're seeing Richard, right? So you see Richard.
Yes.
And everybody's met Richard. So, yeah, we couldn't do this without Richard. Because I still think people, only faculty and students are still allowed on Buff State, I think. I think that's still true.
Facebook said they're ready if we're ready.
Oh, good. Okay, is everybody ready? Do you have water? You're all set? Okay, good. Okay, so.
Okay, is the timer set to 59:59?
Yes, it is.
Okay, hit the silver switch that turns the timer on. Is the light on?
Yes, it is.
Put the clapper in front of your face. When you hit the clapper, you're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace, being recorded here at the Think Twice Radio in the home of the future. Thanks to our producer, Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. And also here on Haudenosaunee land, I want to mention, which is stolen land, stolen from the Haudenosaunee. They still exist. They're still here. They're still our neighbors and our dear allies and friends, and we're thankful for them and for this whole creation. And I'm very thankful for our topic of tonight and for our guests of tonight. Our topic is human rights and religion. So it's already been a learning experience for me, and I hope we'll have plenty of shared learning going on. So I'll just go around the way I see the people on the Zoom. Beatrice Singh-Arnone. Hi, B. Is here also from the Sikh community and part of the network of religious communities. Just a dear friend and teacher and worker for human rights, I think I can say, and a peaceful, loving world. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Vicki.
Oh, thanks for coming. And Dr. Rolanda Ward, our dear friend, ex-classmate, I have to say, and more, I can't help bragging about that, but anyway, and director at the Ostapenko, Rose Bente Lee Ostapenko Center for Race, Equity, and Mission of Niagara University, and a social worker. That's what I have to say. So welcome, Rolanda.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
We're so glad you're here. And last but not least, we have Rabbi Alex Lazarus-Klein, who is here representing, I think he's representing the Federation to a certain extent, the Jewish Federation, yes, and the human rights. What is it?
It's called the Jewish Community Relations Council.
The Jewish Community Relations Council, right. So that's the word I was trying to remember. Jewish Community Relations Council. And also been associated with the network and with different interfaith efforts, including ones that we have worked on together for years, many years gone along. So anyway, so we like to start out, and especially in this case, I think it's a nice way to start out to think about the values that we want to uphold with this conversation. Both in the conversation, but also in the issue. What are the values that you think of and that you really feel are most important? So why don't we start with you, Beatrice, if you want.
I think, just to respect each other's thoughts and ideas, that we all bring something, and it's okay if we don't agree. So.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks. That's so important. Yes, that's our learning edges sometimes. Anyway, and Rolanda?
As a social worker, we have quite a few values that we try to make sure that people are adhering to. But I think the two of them that are most critical when we're talking about our connections to other faiths or different communities has to do with how we value the relationships that we're trying to build with one another. Mm-hmm. And so if I see you as being in relation to you and not just as a person who exists in my same space, then I'm going to be more likely to engage you very differently, to be loving, to be kind, to be compassionate, to be all of those things. And then if I think about not just the relationship that I'm trying to bring forward, but if I'm thinking about how do I expect others to treat you in this world with dignity and with respect, then I'm going to be thinking about what your needs are more than mine. So I think that those are two of the values that as a social worker, I think I try to use most often as I'm walking about spaces in our community.
Wonderful reasons for having you on the show, right? No, those are very good, very, very good, very important for social work and for all of us, really, and everywhere and no matter what we do. And Alex, what would you bring in as a value that you want to stress?
Well, I'll offer two Jewish values. One, we say B'Tselem Elohim, which is this idea from Genesis that we're all made in the image of God. And if we see each other in the image of God, then we really have to be nice to one another. There's also a concept from the rabbis called Machlochet B'Shem Shamayim, which means a holy confrontation or a conversation, probably better. And basically the idea is that when we're speaking in a way that's authentic to who we are and to the world and to our community, and another person does, even if we're in disagreement, it's still a holy conversation.
Very true. Very good. Actually, you keep getting me tempted to go into what our next show is going to be about, which is very much about that. But anyway, and I would just also offer that, when I think of social work, I think about, I think UB, School of Social Work, has said that they sort of look at the two parts of social work to be most especially trauma and trauma-informed care, but trauma and human rights. And so, which makes me think very much of truth and love, or love and truth, is that, that loving attitude to other people, that being in relationship. And also truth means, telling what we see or how we see. Sometimes it will include things that we wish weren't true or that other people might wish to think weren't true. But if it's an open, honest conversation, then that truth and love helps us get to a fuller understanding of all the things that we can do and all the things that we might need to do too. So anyway, one thing I want to share before we go to the next step is just if we if we were lucky enough to not have scheduled this for when Maheswari Krishnan who is part of the Hindu Cultural Center. I asked her to be on this, and she would have been, except right now she's in a plane. So we appreciate her and hope it's a safe journey. But in the meanwhile, so when I found that she couldn't be on with us, I said, well, what would you say? You know, what would you want to say if you were going to be on the show? And she said, well, I would say, you know, for human rights and Hinduism, I would have to say it's a very mixed bag. You know, in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. So, you know, there's so much about respect for the individual, about caring for all and for all of the creation, and that empathy and compassion for all the creatures and for all the people. And but then there's ways that some of it is very old and it's from a different place in time before people had really understood what equality means and what equity calls for. So she was saying, you know, there's ways in which Hinduism is not about human rights, where women do not get treated equally, although there are some excuses for that. But and there's reasons for it, but it's not an equal partnership. You know, and it's not so, you know, so I felt like the way she couched it for women and also for people of the whole thing with the caste system and everything else, you know, is in there too, where, you know, or socioeconomic issues, I think, you know, but anyway, she said it's in some ways very much about human rights, and in some ways it has not yet reached up to the point that the society here and now needs it to be for human rights. So that, I really felt like that was a great way to start off the conversation, or at least to me, to frame the conversation with that paradox about. And then after she said it, I thought, well, that's so true. It seems so true to me. So I want to ask, maybe if each of you wants to sort of go around and say, you know, what do you think of that, or how that relates to your faith tradition? So again, Beatrice, if you want to go first, then we'll just go around.
Yeah, I think you know, it's the difference between faith and scripture and culture when I think of the Sikh faith also being rooted in India. So the scripture and the teachings of the gurus, the 10 gurus in Sikhism, were very much about equality and human rights. You know, one of the main tenets of Sikhism is that all of creation is of God, that we are actually a part of God, that we have been separated from the whole of God. And if all of creation is part of God, then we have to treat every living and non-living thing as if it was a part of God, and therefore equal to each other, but also worthy of the respect or the veneration that we give the Almighty Creator. So, you know, the scripture has many examples of how we should treat each other equally. However, in terms of culture, there is some differences, and you can even see it within, you know, different people within a place of worship, or one place of worship to another. That are considered more conservative, and some that are considered more liberal. So when you look at it again, I think it's the difference though between the actual faith and the teachings of the faith and the culture where the faith was rooted. I guess that's how I would start in terms of in the comparison. Mm-hmm. But many examples of how we should be treating each other equally and treating each other as if we are from God, that we are a part of God. So.
Right. Well, thanks. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Very true. What would you say, Rolanda?
So when I think about how it is that we get ourselves into this messiness called life, it really comes down to that cultural component, right? We all exist in spaces that are unique to the space that we're in. And that space then dictates how we then see each other, right? And so if we're in spaces where it's a cooperative living environment, then we're going to treat each other much more lovingly. We're going to give of ourselves, be sacrificial. But yet, if we live in spaces where it's about independence, it's about personal accumulation of wealth or goods, then that cultural context starts to cloud our perception of what our Holy One asks of us. And I think that's been true for, if we're going to understand our biblical texts until now.
Right.
I think the challenge becomes for all of us is when I think about whose family I am in, right, I like to think that I'm in the family of God. And so that means for me, right, that the people that I encounter, I have to always be questioning myself. Am I living a life that is pleasing to God? So when I meet someone, be it that they're without housing, and I have to say that my students challenged me this past semester in our book group, which is our theological book group. And I think we're reading the book, Who Will Be a Witness? And, they challenged me to think about the resources that I have. I think that, I'm giving and financially of my time. But my students, pushed a Catholic perspective on me. I'm not Catholic, but they pushed this perspective on me around, if I have what I need, then the rest that I have is what I don't need. Right. And that means that it's available as a resource to others. And, and I think that then recenters me in my perception of how am I living out God's requirement of me that I live in community with others, even when I may not know them. So I think the context is important because context shapes our perception of what we have. And we have to fight back in our understanding of that and hold true to what our faith traditions really do require of us.
Wow. Yes. And it is a lot. And there's always a long way to go, I think, it's a huge undertaking to truly live up to our faith and to everything that's being asked of us in the most complete way. So, and Alex, what would you say? What would you say about your reaction to that and how it relates?
Well, first of all, compliment the answers already offered by Rolanda and Beatrice. I would say that our religious spiritual tradition is a tool, and it doesn't mean that it's a perfect tool. It needs to be used in the proper fashion. I think from a Jewish perspective, the one insight that they had thousands of years ago that they emphasize over and over again is that we were slaves in Egypt once. And therefore, you should treat the stranger in a certain way. And that was really unique at the time. It led to insights within Christianity and Islam as well about how we treat one another, especially the outsider. There are three ways that as Jews we show kindness to one another, and this is from the rabbis, so this is long after their original Judeans. They said that we visit the sick, we bury the dead, and we welcome the stranger. Because those are the three areas where the person on the other side is at a disadvantage, and they can't ask for help directly. And I think that that's really important. Does Judaism always live up to its ideals? Did the people in biblical times always live up to their ideals? No, we're human beings trying to make do in a very complicated world. But I'm grateful for the perspective and the tools that they offered from thousands of years ago.
Right, right. Very, very informative. Thank you, and I love that your analysis and contribution. I want to say
Can I just add to that a little bit, Vicki?
Sure.
And I think just to add to, we were talking about the difference between the culture and faith, but within the faith of Sikhism, there is the concept of seva, which is supposed to be selfless service. And with that idea that all of creation has been separated from God, it's also a Sikh's duty to then therefore bring all of creation back in to merge with God. So the Sikh's duty is not just to respect, but it's supposed to be a life of action where you're working towards elevating all of creation back into God. So you can see where human rights and even respecting the environment, all of those are important to that idea of Sikhism. And then the service that you do, the selfless service that you do, is supposed to be elevating all of this earthly world back to the plane of God. And so, so again, though we can talk about what culture says, it is an expectation of a Sikh not only to interact with the world, but interact in a way that elevates the world to bring it back to the plane of God.
Vicki, can I add to that for a second? Because Beatrice, it's so interesting the way you're framing that, because we actually have a similar Jewish concept, which has to do with this idea that at the beginning of creation, God was kind of in these vessels that broke apart. Mm-hmm. And its duty, this is from the Kabbalists from like 500 years ago, it's our duty to reclaim the sparks of mm-hmm. God in the world. And it seems like your concept that you're describing in Sikhism is actually almost identical. I've never heard that. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
I really appreciate what you've all contributed. One of the things I want to say is when I first thought of this topic, and one of the reasons that we thought of it is because, first of all, we just had International Human Rights Day. That's December 10th. And so that also makes this Human Rights Month. So the Western New York Peace Center has been recognizing that in different ways. And as we said, worldwide it's being recognized, human rights. And I thought, because my background in the interfaith, I thought, well, and I see so often that, that loving each other, loving God and loving each other is in all of the faith traditions, that reverence and reverence for life and for the creation. But then it is true, and as Uma was putting out, is that sometimes the religions, because we are as flawed individuals, don't, I love the way Rolanda put about our actual personal responsibility to try to live up to those faith teachings. Even within the faith, does the faith live up to the faith teachings, just as you were saying, Alex, being a question? And also, do the scriptures, now the scriptures, again, how much are they divine, and then how much of human, or how much of, how much is it a part of the times and traditional thinking of the times when it's being described or written, because it is being described and written. So I think it's very interesting to look at this, and when we see some of the most wonderful, beautiful behavior in the world, that pure and loving behavior in the world, and courageous, that has come from religious people, and then we look at some of the killing, murder, hatred, and just warring that has come. It has also often come from the religions, through sort of imposing its way through the religion and the culture. And so I think there's sort of all of those threads to mix. What do you think about that, Rolanda?
I actually talk about this in one of my classes when it comes to African American faith and social justice. And one of the critiques of the Black Lives Matter movement of the church is that the church has become disconnected from the experiences of people. And so because we sit as individuals with our own faith, right, our belief, our acceptance of what is true and meaningful to us. But then there's this corporate worship component. And what, when we think about the Black church experience, right, corporate worship was often tied to justice, right? So if we're looking at its origins in the United States in the 1800s, and, it was committed to what did it mean for enslaved folks to have their own religious experiences that were outside of their plantation owners, to early civil rights, right? And in the civil rights era certainly was a point in time in which a lot of justice was actually found itself in the origins of the church, right? Inside of the church buildings. But I think now people are questioning that. And have we become too insulated in our experience of what worship is, that it is now disconnected from communal as well as community experiences of who God is outside of the church walls. And so, I think it is a very good critique. Are we raising money for ourselves, or are we raising money to actually do work in community, not just to provide charity to individuals, but to actually address the social justice issues that people face at the very structural level?
Either one of you, any reaction to that, or to what I was just, to that our congregate worship experience and how that relates to human rights, or our the edifice of the organizational, the organized religion as it relates to human rights in that way.
Well, Vicki, I just want to respond because I think often, especially in academic settings and other settings, religions get a really bad rap. Look, if you go into the bookstore, the library, or Amazon, you have a lot of books about how terrible religion is. Mm-hmm. And I think you could do that about any political system or any group organizing system. It comes down to the people involved in it. Certainly what Rolanda's saying, when you lose touch with the greater purpose. And I think that can happen anywhere once you lose touch with your mission and your core values. And I think it's really important that you stay true to it, that you watch out for the people that are taking your faith or your belief or your country away from that, and you fight against that. But don't make religion the boogeyman, or the blame it for everything, because that's not a good understanding of it. It's how we implement things. When we have values, we need to be true to them, and we need a world that's fair and equitable to everyone.
Well, I think we want to try to be true to them as much as we can. All I would say is that sort of, I love the Hindu idea that action is by its nature imperfect, and so all of these different paths or institutions, are also imperfect just because of being in the world. Just because our strengths and our weaknesses are one and the same a lot of the time. So, of course, perfection doesn't exist in this world, is one part of that as well. What were you going to say, B?
I was just going to add to what Rabbi Alex was saying, and I think it's about, like we were saying, maybe the people and how they use the tool, of religion. People people are the imperfect part of it.
Right.
People and what they want or feel they need, working for something that's, using religion as their justification rather than looking to the religion for the path. So you have to look to, for me as a Sikh, I look to the scripture for the meaning and the words to bring me to the path. I shouldn't decide on my path and then go look to the scripture to confirm the path that I want to take. So I think that's kind of what happens is it gets turned around. Somebody decides on a path that they want, and then they go to some aspect of religion or scripture that will allow them to affirm the path they've chosen rather than following the path that God has mapped or chosen for them.
Rolanda, you're shaking your head. So where's
No,
where's
I
the
completely agree
yeah,
with
no,
that.
no, I
right?
know. I mean, you're
Right?
I didn't mean shake. What is it? Nodding your
no,
head.
I
Nodding is what I
completely
meant to
agree
say.
with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like whatever,
No, I want to
whatever is
yeah.
our way
Yeah.
to communicate with God, right? Like the purpose is not to ask for the prayers to be focused on us, but for me, right? I'm always asking God, where do you want me to be, right?
Right.
Where do you need me to go? And in that, I'm understanding what His will is for my life.
Right.
So I completely, because I am always asking the question, right? Where do I need to go? Because I understand that the work is on me, for me to get to the purpose that God is asking and calling me to work within. So, I can. That resonated with me, and that was my hallelujah moment for the night.
I meant nodding your head. That's another reason I stepped aside at the Peace Center. I meant to say nodding your head. You were agreeing.
Okay.
But it makes me think so much of oh Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. That humility and that asking for the guidance, looking for the guidance. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I would just say that, I come from a more liberal tradition within Judaism. And tradition I come from Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, doesn't always hold God as acting directly in history through us.
Sure.
So I think, we have, from our perspective, God is inside of us and part of us. And I guess I would say from my deepest core, I would say when we are acting in a way that is godly, there's something called predicate theology, where instead of saying what God is, we talk about what things in the world God is, their goodness is God. And that when we're acting right, we feel it in our core. When we connect to others, I definitely believe that there is that sense of unity and purpose and happiness that does come from that when we're trying to, perfect the world. When we're talking about social action, from a Jewish sense, we say tikkun olam. That's the way contemporarily we'd say, which means repair of the world. And we use that all the time in a liberal setting, certainly. But I think when we do that, when we act for others and are selfless, then we're so much happier. That's, I think, how human beings are meant to be.
So when we're thinking about human rights, because I've started to go, I want to talk about dualism and non-dualism and things like that we don't necessarily need to address, although it is part of the question. And another question being about worship and acts, right? So, how to balance those things out. So, but I in the context of human rights, how that is interpreted by the religions. So why don't we go through a little bit like how you feel it is being realized, and some growth areas for that. You know, is that something that each of you might want to address? Beatrice?
Sure. I mean, I can. I don't want to just talk necessarily how it's being realized now, because it is part of the Sikh faith. That there was a time in history in India when the rulers were very oppressive and forcing conversion of people that were not of the faith of the ruler. And a non-Sikh, the non-Sikhs came to the Guru and said, "Can you help us?" And the Guru, who had formerly been a warrior, had chosen a path of peace and nonviolence, said that he would go to the ruler, and if the ruler could convert him, then the others would follow. But if he could not convert him, then he would have to leave the others alone. So the ruler, being very powerful and, feeling he could do this, attempted to convert the Guru through torture of he himself, but also his companions and people that were close to him. And the Guru did not convert, and he was beheaded. But it was a very strong symbol and message that was sent throughout the land that people should be able to live according to their faith. And following that event, the Order of the Khalsa was established, which is considered the saint soldier or warrior soldier. So the following Guru established a group of men, or I shouldn't say men, a group of soldiers who were supposed to uphold the rights of others, whether they were Sikh or not Sikh, so that they were supposed to be defenders of the rights of others, again, no matter who they were. So everyone should have been able to practice their faith as they saw fit. So it was about defending the rights of all who were oppressed. So that was the establishment of the Order of the Khalsa. Now, today, one example of addressing human rights that Sikhs have is an organization called Khalsa Aid. And basically, they raise money and they just go to disasters around the world to help in situations. So, one was, I think in Hurricane Katrina, they came and helped out. Or in Haiti, they helped out. So it doesn't have to be any Sikh particular thing. It's anything where there's a problem that needs addressing that they can help support through volunteers and funding. They try to go and address that need. And also it was, pretty well publicized when COVID hit and there was a need for oxygen. They actually started bringing tanks of oxygen to the Sikh Gurdwaras that people could then come and get oxygen at the Gurdwaras in India when the COVID was really high. The rates were very high in India. Mm-hmm. So those are just some examples today of how Sikhs try to live out that idea of human rights, but it was a very big part of our history, and then establishing an active group called the Saint Soldiers or the Khalsa, who were to uphold the rights of others who could not defend themselves.
Wow, that's a definitely great example of defending human rights. And then a growth area, is there an area you want to share as like an area where you hope and you think there's more progress coming?
Yeah, I mean, for growth, it comes back, I think, to that culture aspect. Mm-hmm. That, again, in the faith, we are supposed to treat each other as equals and respect each other and have compassion. But, there's, again, some, and I don't want to say it's a Sikh thing, it's more pockets here or there, or people, but whether it's women in some respects, that may not be respected. However, I want to say our whole board right now is almost all women at our Gurdwara. So I do want to mention that, but maybe at another Gurdwara you might not see that. or people who have divorced. There may be some kind of stigma associated with that in the faith, or LGBTQ. There's room for growth there in terms of that. Again, you can find some liberal gurdwaras where they're totally accepting of the LGBTQ community, but then you will also find some that are more conservative or, older rooted in older traditions that are not as open to that idea. So you kind of have to, I think like many of our faiths, there's different different levels of accepting of people that are not in the traditional roles or follow the traditional ways. So
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So Rolanda, what would you say?
I think Rabbi Alex was going to jump in.
Oh, no, I was just resting my hand. You can go, Rolanda. You're okay.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming. Actually, maybe we should do Rabbi Alex next, because I know you have to leave, and I don't want, to make sure for you to just miss this part of it. So.
Yeah, I apologize. It might look like I'm in Jerusalem, but I'm actually waiting for my son at soccer.
Yeah, no, we didn't think you were.
Look, I think from a Jewish perspective, and I was going to say, Beatrice, also the strong drive among Sikhs to feed people, which is incredible. And I know in your good Rolanda, they do that regularly.
Yes,
and I think the largest food providers, the one individual places in a Sikh community.
Yeah, for me, I guess it's part of so much of the daily thing. I don't even think about that sometimes, but our langar is the meal that goes with every service that anyone can come to. They don't have to attend the service. And most gurdwaras that run 24/7 have food available all the time, or at least twice a day, for anybody who would like to come in and have a meal.
I just want to interject that at the Parliament of Religions, both times that I went when it was in person, the Sikhs fed everyone, and we had tens of thousands of people at least one of them. There were many thousands of people that were fed for free by the Sikhs, and they're generous. And delicious food. Oh, delicious. Yes.
So thanks for bringing that up, Rabbi.
Yeah, but anyway, so back to what you were going to say, though. Sorry.
So what I would say is that, look, we're a very traumatized community, not just recently. I mean, I'm the generation after the Holocaust. So basically, only 70 or so years ago, we were almost wiped out completely. Over half of the Jewish population was wiped out. 90% of Orthodox Judaism. So we're very much in that very difficult phase that we felt like we're about to be wiped out. So we really want to protect ourselves. And I think the struggle we have right now is between this particularism and universalism. That, when you've had such a trauma so close and so immediate, your instinct is to really protect each other. And sometimes that's at expense of others. I think it's a tension point. And, we, like my mother-in-law's family, almost all were wiped out in the Holocaust. She actually today, her book just came out about Jewish Holocaust love stories.
Wow.
You can go look it up, Mindel Pierce. I think it's a real challenge to have people feel secure enough to worry more about the universal than the particular. And hopefully, my kids' generation, because they're, another generation past mine, hopefully they'll start feeling a little bit more comfortable, and Judaism won't feel that immediate threat that it felt.
I just want to add, as the daughter of a German Jew who also went through, the Holocaust and lost. He didn't lose his immediate family, but almost all the extended family was eliminated. But I always think, especially as a social worker, that it's not just there was the Holocaust, yes, but then there was centuries of pogroms and everything else that came before, and so all of that, and and actually one of the things that's very much in this conversation is that the history is present in our legacy, in our reality. There are very real effects through nature and nurture from all of those experiences that are lived through and that are in us and in our cultures because of the things that have happened to us or done by us or done to us or whatever the case may have been. So anyway, I just wanted to say that's centuries of that. So it's not an excuse; it's a reason. It's a reason.
Right. Look, it's embedded. My family, they came escaping the pogroms before that.
Right.
2 generations. I'm a 3rd generation American myself,
Right.
and I think it's embedded in you, of course, in their actual DNA and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the flip side of that, I think it makes us more likely in the Jewish community to fight for victims because we feel victimized over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a strong drive within the Jewish community to protect the other because of that, even though on the other side you want to protect yourself. So it's kind of both of those.
Right. Rabbi Heschel. Yeah. Anyway, and Rolanda, what would you say about that?
No, I think everybody is on it. I can't universally speak for the entire Christian faith.
No.
But I like to think that for the African American faith tradition, it is out of enslavement, and so with that comes the continuous threat of your life, right? And I think embedded in this conversation of human rights and racial
Yes.
Awareness.
Absolutely.
Right. Because we can walk through this world with a religious belief, but yet people judge us based upon the phenotypes that they see. And so that becomes really how we're treated. And when we talk about human rights, it most likely is always tied, right, to that level of classism or racism that exists. And then we can tie on the religion, because once people know what our religious experiences are, then they'll tie on those as well. And so it becomes really difficult to disentangle all of it, because we're complex beings that exist in the world. Now, where is there work to do? I think it's always in making sure that when people show up at our doors, our faith institutions, we're welcoming them and hearing what their stories are. Their stories are not unique. And so what do we do with that one story and tie it to something that we can actually work towards justice? And I think that's the most critical part for me, right? I want to be a part of a faith tradition that is trying to eliminate the barriers, the oppressive conditions that people exist in, because that in and of itself, just like Rabbi Alex says, that's God, is when that's eliminated. So we are fighting, but we also have work to do.
We certainly do. We have quite a lot of work to do. And I feel, as we're saying, it's very thorny, it's difficult. It's a little bit of half empty, half full. And I do think that question about worship and action. So as a social worker, who sometimes actually who has now I haven't gone to many Sikh services, I must say, although I spend a lot of time in the Vedanta in Hinduism, which is not the same, but a little more in that direction, and also to Temple Beth Zion and Holy Trinity, even right now, and Riverside Salem and IPN. That what I feel like so much of what I feel in my own personal faith, which sort of says, that there's all these different paths, and that, for me, I'm more bushwhacking. So I take a little bit out of this and a little bit of that, and I see how they're all true and they're all also flawed, right? But I feel like so much is in agreement, and the agreement are these principles that we're talking about that make us love each other and care for each other and the creation, and see the divine in each other. And also but as a social worker, I have to say, or as a person of faith, that the religion is the religion of service, of just trying to help the world, that tikkun olam, the healing of the world, the caring for the world, the nurturing and mothering of the world, and fathering. Now, I think you might have somebody in the car now. Do you? Can we see?
Yeah, so no, he's shy here, but
he doesn't want to come on. I know he doesn't even remember me, I bet. Although we have played at it.
Well, no, you met him at the Japanese when we did the wonderful ceremony for Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes.
He was over there that you organized. I would just add something that Bill Hennessy, who's the pastor over at North Presbyterian, he told me there are 3 rules when you're doing interfaith dialogue, and he didn't develop it. It's a Christian theologian, I think.
Oh, okay.
He said, first of all, don't compare your best to their worst. Don't pick someone, don't have a conversation with someone that knows everything with someone who doesn't know everything.
Right.
And then also have a little holy envy. That we should always, be a little envious. And in terms of Christianity, Rolanda, one of the things I'm always envious is when a lot of Christian services I go to, they will always put human rights like front and center, like there's a mission or something going on, and do fundraisers for that right away. It's something in our Jewish community we don't do enough. So there's quite a lot there. Just want to point out, I'm always envious of that.
Well,
we're always passing the plate. Passing the plate.
But for others, the key thing is not just for yourself, do it for others, right?
Right.
All right, I got to run and get my son home, but enjoy the rest of your conversation. It's
Thank
been great.
you so much for joining us.
All right, bye-bye.
Shalom.
Even though Rabbi Alex had to leave, I have to say, talking about that little envy piece there, I find the Jewish community very active in Buffalo, having whether it's discussions or talks or fundraisers as well. Really trying to educate people on the issues that are out there, social justice issues among them. So I look at the Jewish community and I think how well organized they are, how well they are communicating with all the different groups that there are, from the most conservative Orthodox Jewish temple to the most liberal. They still have a unified, the Buffalo Jewish Federation, where they all get some information and are centralized in their communication with each other. So talking a little bit about that envy, I think they really do a good job with that action as well. So
now I'm hoping that Richard's going to come in and reset the pictures, but if not, can you just go up a little bit higher, both of you, if you can, because for the people, anyway, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. There we go. And I just love those points that everyone has been making. I think that's very true. That I was going to say too. Temple Beth Zion has, a food pantry, and I feel like, and there is a certain amount of defending, and it's like that in our religions, just like it is with our own personal selves. The ways. Well, like Epictetus said, everything has 2 handles, one by which it can be held, one by which it cannot be held, right? So there's ways in which, there's the ways where we're doing a good job, and then there's the other ways, the growth areas, that we're working, that we're hoping and we're trying, to get to. And I want to say, I think, there is so much good that can come and so much that needs to be done, especially the things that people wouldn't ordinarily do, the things that require that leap of faith. So if you take people of faith, those are the people. When I've seen people getting arrested for human rights, right? Oftentimes it is those people of faith, more often than not, who are going to take that leap of faith because even though all reason tells you that it's not really going to help that much, or it's, I think about the military and foreshadow of things to come, talking about the reduction in the military budget that we so need. That's the thing that's too big to deal with. So who deals with it? People of faith. The Catholic worker community, the people, clergy and laity from different, religious institutions, more often than not.
Yeah, I think, right, like, even though we know that there's been a decline of actually going to services,
Right. Mm-hmm.
the one thing that we still can get some sense about is that people are connected to faith traditions, even if
Right.
it is very distantly. And I think we still need to hold on to that. Why did we host a faith, COVID, and science panel? Because we know that people get their information from trusted leaders, and people from religious communities are still considered trusted leaders in community. So I think it's critical that we remain committed to being on top of human justice issues, social justice issues, and that when it comes to human rights, be it environmental, political, social, health, that we're always making sure that people are well, healthy, so that they can achieve goals. And for me, right, it would be to make sure that we're understanding what our purpose is according to the will of God. So it's been a great conversation tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's so good. It's so great to have you here. And actually, so you're right. We're just at the time to start to end. So if each of you have some, just final thought or sort of a bottom line or a hope for what you hope people might do in the future, what we can each do in this topic. So, B?
I did want to just thank you again for having us. I agree. Wonderful conversation. Enjoyed speaking with you and Rolanda and Rabbi Alex Lazarus-Klein. So thank you. I think the final thought is to really remember what our traditions tell us about how to treat fellow human beings and about how we are a part of this world and how we should be taking action to help and support and secure human rights through, again, many of those issues that Rolanda mentioned, which includes taking care of the environment, which includes taking care of each other, which includes making sure there's affordable housing and shelter for people, making sure there's no more food insecurity. We have to address all these issues because they deal with the human being. They affect the human being that is our fellow man, or a part of God that we believe, and we should continue to work towards those things. So
Thank you so much. And Rolanda, any last morsel? No?
No, I think Beatrice summed it up really well. And I just challenge all your listeners to find their inner God. And if we all did a little bit more of that work, I think that we would have a much better world. So if you are not, I'm going to be a little religious right now. If you are not connected to some kind of faith tradition, I challenge you to explore that. You might find meaning and purpose for yourself, but you also might be helping the world become more whole and healed.
Well, amen, amen, alhamdulillah, om shanti to that. So I want to say Thank you both so very much. Many thanks to Alex, Rabbi Alex Lazarus-Klein, and Dr. Rolanda Ward, Beatrice Singh-Arnone. We're so grateful to you, and we've been talking peace, and together we are talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much.